So a potential customer sends you a request for a quote, you go to the meetings, you do all the legwork to get that quote done, and crickets. Is the customer just wasting my time? What's up guys, Ian Sandusky from Lakewood Machine and Tool back here again for Practical Machinist. And today on Shop Talk, we're gonna be diving back into the Practical Machinist forums to deal with a post that covered exactly this issue. But before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications below to make sure you never miss a video. Let's get into it. Okay guys, so today on Shop Talk, as mentioned, we are going to be dealing with an issue that I have seen time and time again. And clearly it happens often enough out there to result in some very, very long threads covering this issue, including the one we're going to be talking about today. We're going to link it below here. Put it succinctly, a guy came on to the shop ownership and management subforum of the Practical Machinist forums with a little bit of a situation on his hands. I won't dive too deeply into this scenario because it was a very long description of what exactly the scenario was, but we're gonna cover it enough to get to the core of the issue, which I think can be helpful to some of you guys out there. As mentioned, I've been in the situation a million times before. You probably have too, so let's kind of try to cover it. So he came on and was saying that he had someone get in touch with him. This sounded like a pretty big manufacturing facility. They got in touch with him and wanted him to come in to quote out on a job. So as you do with these kind of scenarios, he drives on over to the plant, spends all the time getting checked in. If you've ever been to a large manufacturing facility, you know how this can feel. You know, you sit there and you wait for the guy. Oh, there's the guy that was supposed to meet me. Go meet him, walk all the way down to the floor and go to take a look at the requirement that they're looking for. So in this scenario, it sounded like it was the maintenance engineer or the production supervisor, something like that. You know, we're not talking top of the chain here. We're talking middle of the rung in terms of the hierarchy of the company here. And they had some kind of fixture or device they wanted made that measured something. Now, as these kind of things tend to go, this guy was not a machinist. The guy asking for the quote, not a machinist, not a draftsman. He didn't give him a drawing and say, I want you to make this. He showed him, hey, I have this problem. I need to solve it. I think it should be something like this. What can you do? And as mentioned, I've been in this scenario. I can feel my blood pressure starting to go up already, and we'll get to why. So the customer wants the fixture to measure a certain dimension. They don't know how they can do it. But he did get the impression from this potential customer that the two most important things for this job were the cost and the time. So essentially they wanted it cheap and they wanted it fast. Not a problem. I know everybody kind of recoils when they go, ooh, they want it cheap. Some guys want things cheap and fast. You know, that's not a problem if you know what you're getting into. Better to know up front. And they also said if this prototype or, you know, the first off that this guy makes of this device to measure works, they have, I don't know, 5 or 10 of them they want to order in different sizes. So this could end up being a good job. You know, sometimes you got to do the prototype to get the production run, and this kind of sounds like that kind of scenario. So he goes back to his shop, puts his engineering hat on, and works out an idea. And this guy actually created a prototype of the part. Will mention he doesn't have a PO yet. A little bit of a risk there, but in any case, he thought this was a good thing to do. So he goes back to his shop, makes this prototype. He calls up the company and says, hey, listen, not only do I have a design for you, I have a prototype. They say, great, come on by, let's try it out. So he goes on over, they try it out. Oh, great, this thing works perfect, according to the guy who asked him to do it. The problem is in this scenario, and this is why I was saying I could feel my blood pressure going up, was now there are 5 other people involved in this project. They are the people up the chain that have to approve this, so it's his supervisor. He didn't specify who these people are, but it could be that guy's supervisor, could be the CEO of the company, could be somebody from another department that wants in on this. And now this guy has a problem, and that problem is that all 5 of these people are throwing new requirements at this apparatus that he's built that weren't included in the original quote, that weren't included in the original requirement. So I don't know what they were, but if it had to measure, now it has to measure and have a pokey oak fixture, and it has to be freestanding, and so on and so forth. So not only did the scope of the job go like this, but the scope of the requirements just went through the roof. So he goes, okay, takes it back to his shop and starts getting to work on this. And as of the initial post of this scenario had been unresolved. But he came on and wanted to ask, with all these new requirements, he got scared. He says, am I wasting my time? Number one, is this customer wasting my time? Number two, is this normal for this kind of work? And three, what do you do when the requirements change like this? The people who replied in the forum had a lot of the same kind of opinions that I had on this, so that was nice to see. Firstly, as everybody else there mentioned, this is an incredibly common situation. I found myself in this scenario. We've done a lot of work like this, and over the years we've done a lot of these kind of project-based jobs. So as opposed to something where someone comes to you with a drawing and says, make X number of parts out of this material for us, project-based is kind of problem-based. So, these companies are manufacturing adjacent that we've worked with in the past. They're food manufacturers, they are electronics manufacturers. Sorry, I shouldn't say manufacturing adjacent, they are machining adjacent. They are factories that produce things. And they're people who are asking you the requirements for these. They understand what they want, but they don't know how to get there. They say, I need something to solve this problem. How do we do it? And first off, there is nothing wrong with this kind of customer. Absolutely nothing wrong. I know we've said we're getting a little scared of them. It's kind of a dicey situation. There's nothing wrong with this kind of customer. With some of these kinds of customers, we have had, here at my company, we've had fantastic working relationships with some of them for decades in some cases. A job that may start with you going in to fix a little job, fix a little fixture or something for somebody, can turn into a huge manufacturing job, depending on who else gets your contact info with that company. There's nothing wrong with this kind of customer, but you do have to understand what you're walking into in this kind of scenario. The issue becomes exactly what this poster's story was relating, and that's that typically when someone calls you into their shop to solve a problem, you are dealing with someone that's here on the hierarchy. You're dealing with the guy who works with these machines every day, who has the authority to call somebody in, but you're not dealing with everybody right off the bat who has to approve that PO before it goes out. So the requirement may start here when the manufacturing engineer talks to you, but then his boss gets involved and it goes to here, and then his boss gets involved and it goes to here. This ballooning of expectations and changing of requirements is something that can happen quite frequently as you deal with more and more people in the job. To answer his question, I will say in the grand scheme of things, these people are probably not intentionally trying to waste your time. As we always say, we like to think we're dealing with normal, rational thinking people out there. These people are not saying, twirling their mustaches and saying, hey, how can we waste this shop's time? How can we get this guy in here away from his shop? They're obviously not saying that. What they may not be is being mindful or respectful of your time, because they're just not thinking of your time in the way that you do. If you are someone who runs your shop, yeah, you have to go and sacrifice time out on the road to do things, but especially if you're a small shop, maybe you're a one-man show, maybe you're a two-man show, maybe your machines aren't running if you're out there taking meetings. Maybe there's nobody answering the phone if you're out there taking meetings. Especially as a smaller shop, it can have a huge impact on your company if people are not respectful of your time and calling you out and calling you out and calling you out. Remember that every minute that you are not at your business working on your business costs somebody. It either costs a customer or it is costing you. And there are some ways to mitigate that we'll get into here in a second. But look at it this way. If I charge, let's say $3,000 in machining time against a job. So I go quote out a job. Yeah, that's gonna take X number of hours. I'm gonna charge $3,000 for that job. And I quote that out based on my machining time. And that's 30 hours or 35 hours, whatever it is. If that job runs in that amount of hours that I quoted, I'm hitting my rate per hour. I'm making the money that we, forecast to keep the company running. What now if not only on top of that 30 or 35 hours for that $3,000 that I have in that quote, now we build 20 hours of meetings, quoting, testing, phone calls, revision changes. All of a sudden, that job that was supposed to take 30 hours now took 50 or took 55. And I know it sounds a little silly to say, Ian, 20 hours of meetings, 25 hours of meetings. For some of these projects, if you include the commute to where you're going, you include all the check-in, the waiting for people, the conversations, the quoting, very, very easy for some of these jobs that are a little bit bigger to hit 20, 30, 40 hours of unpaid time. So all of a sudden that job may not be that good. All of a sudden that job may be barely breaking even, and then at the end of the month you're sitting there going, how are my expenses so high relative to my income at this company? This is one of the scenarios that you can get into. So to me, there are a few ways of handling these situations as we've talked about, some of which I have had work out better than others, but I'm gonna highlight two from the forums that I did agree with. And the first one that I agreed with from the forum was you have to take a very hard look in the mirror when you're looking at these kind of jobs. It's easy to blame the potential customer. Oh, they're wasting my time. Oh, this, that, and the other thing. You have to look in the mirror and say, is my company or am I good at this kind of work? Because if you're not, it may be in your benefit, the benefit of the customer even, for you to flat out decline this kind of work. Say, no quote, can't do it, appreciate it, we just don't offer this kind of service. I think this is a really important thing to note because we've talked before about chasing every job that comes through your door. Guys, at the end of the day, every job is not a good job for every company. There's kind of work that we turn away today, even though we theoretically could make it work, because we're just not good at it. We've learned over the years that our time is better spent chasing a different kind of work and working on that rather than trying to be everything to everybody. And especially when it comes to these kind of engineer, project-based jobs, you may not have the skill set at your company to do well on them. You may not have the time to do well on them. Even if you're really good at this kind of work, are you going to be able to make the kind of money that's going to make this job worth it? Because they're stressful, they're time consuming. You need to be really dialed in on your quoting to get it done. So you need to sit back and kind of think, do I even want this kind of work to begin with? And I'll tell you right now that we've had periods in this company here at Lakewood where we've done a ton of this kind of work. There was also a period where we were so busy with other things that I had to turn away this kind of work because it just wasn't a good use of my time or my guys' times. And you know what? Did we miss out on some opportunities there? Probably. But with every opportunity, there's an opportunity cost. And at that point, we weren't in a situation to take on that kind of opportunity cost. We needed to, stick with what we were doing well at. Now, do we do that kind of work? Absolutely. We have some guys here that are very, very good at this kind of work. We have some help that has come in that excels at this kind of work with that engineering background. Now we'll take it on again, and it makes sense. But you do need to sit back and kind of think, do I even want this to begin with? The second thing to keep in mind with this kind of job that somebody pointed out on there, I can't remember exactly how they phrased it, is even though quoting and the consulting end of things when it comes to work in this field is typically free, or at least you consider it a cost of doing business. So if some guy comes in my shop and says, hey, I want 10 of these parts, can you quote it? I'm not gonna say 99% of the time, sure, give me $100 for the quote. That doesn't make any sense. You would have no work if you did that to everybody. That said, when it comes to these project-based jobs, it's not a bad thing to consider a consulting fee. As we've said before, your time's not free. Somebody's always paying for it. Either the customer is paying for it or you are paying for it. Some of those costs, you just have to eat. Some of them are not wise to eat. If I'm in a scenario like this, and I do this rarely based on the project, but almost 100% of the time, if I'm gonna take on this kind of work, I will offer, my first visit, my first initial look over the job, the first meeting, I don't even bring up any kind of cost. It is free. I wanna go see what they're looking at. Obviously based on the phone call or the pictures they've sent, I know that this is something that's worth going to take a look at. So I'll go do that. That's all included. I'm not gonna even bring up charging for that. That said, once I'm there and if I see that this job is going to take a million different revisions because I'm dealing with maybe people who just don't quite know what they want, or it's a very complex job that's gonna require hours of looking into the automation, Engineering, you know, if this is one of these jobs where they want something to do 30 different things and we're going to have to literally get one of our engineers to look at it very hard, spend a lot of time before we can even quote it, I will consider a consulting fee. And the way I work it on the times when I do is I will just flat out lay it out to the customer after that first meeting. And I'll say, listen guys, this is a big project. I want to make sure that you guys are getting what you want out of this. I want to make sure that we are also covering everything on this. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to get a design. You're going to get a solid model of it. You're going to get a full engineering review. You're going to get all this stuff for this consulting fee. And this consulting fee is going to include X number of revisions, X number of meetings, and so on and so forth. If you choose to go ahead, and it's going to include a quote for the actual job, first and foremost. If you choose to go ahead with this, that engineering fee will just be rolled in to the quote. So if we do this work to quote this out, design it, you know, this isn't just for a quote, this is, you know, coming with a design. You pay the money and you either get the design or you order that from us and that fee is essentially waived because I roll it into the actual quote. So it goes against it, if you know what I mean, because a lot of your work is already done that way. You do have to be kind of choosy when you bust this out. If you just kind of throw this kind of consulting fee at any job out there, it can scare people off, and I don't advise doing it under every scenario, but it is something. If you can see a job starting to go sideways, you can say, listen, we are kind of at the end of the free quoting period here. Anything further is going to be engineering and design, so we do need to take some kind of retainer for this. And I think that works. I've had that work. I have had companies for sure say, do you know what, we're gonna go with company B. And then you find out there were 4 other companies quoting this. And that's why you want your consulting fee. Because you never know, you could do all this work to design something. You know, they ask you, hey, listen, we want to come up with something that does this. You show them how to do it, and then they pivot and go to a different company that will do it for cheaper. Happens all the time. So you do need to make sure that you're not getting too greedy when you're doing your quoting, engineering, design stuff on this kind of work. But you do need to also make sure that you are protecting yourself because, you know, as I always say, nice, normal, rational thinking people, we like to think everybody's like that, but there are people that will intentionally or unintentionally take advantage of that situation if you are too easygoing. So something to keep in mind. In any case, guys, I'd like to know in the comments below how you handle this kind of project-based work where, you know, either there's a potential for requirements to change a lot, or right off the bat, you can tell that this is just going to be a bit of a nightmare. How do you handle that? Do you charge a fee? Do you turn it away? What have you had work on that? Would love to know in the comments below. And as always, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications below to make sure you never miss a video. Thank you very much for watching, guys. You take care.